Good morning and welcome to our morning meditation. I hope you are having a morning filled with strength and hope. I apologize, but Reverend Kelly Dignan will not be with us this morning. She will be with us next week. Today, our meditation will take on a little bit of a different format in light of current events across the country in reaction to the murder of George Floyd this past Monday. Today we will be reflecting on the words of Martin Luther King Jr. from the Ware Lecture, which he presented to the UUA General Assembly on May 18th, 1966. So I invite you to settle in as we begin with these words today from Edgar Allan Poe. From the bells. Hear the loud alarm bells, brazen bells. What a tale of terror now their turbulency tells. In the startled ear of night, how they scream out their affright. Too much horrified to speak, they can only shriek, shriek, out of tune, in the clamorous appealing to the mercy of the fire, in the mad expulsation of the deaf and the frantic fire, leaping higher, 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 with a desperate desire, and a result endeavor, now, now to sit or never, by the side of the pale-faced moon, oh, the bells, bells, bells. What a tale of terror tells of despair, how they clang and clash and roar, what a horror they outpour on the bosom of the palpitating air, yet the ear it fully knows, by the twanging and the clanging, how the danger ebbs and flows, yet the ear distinctly tells, in the jangling and the wrangling, how the danger sinks and swells, by the sinking or the swelling of the anger of the bells, of the bells, of the bells, 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 in the clamor and the clangor of the bells. I believe that if you speak out loud your wish of goodwill, that it gives power to that wish and that offering into the universe. Therefore, I offer up today our Black and brown members of our beloved community, our community that does not seem so beloved at this time. Today, we are in the midst of an uprising and on a precipice of change. May all the members of our community rise up and speak out. There is no time to sleep. I will now ring the bells for the unarmed and the dead and invite you to share the names of anyone who you would like to honor, remember, or celebrate at this time. Trayvon Martin, Keith Scott, Etelena Jefferson, Jonathan Farrell, Jordan Edwards, Stephon Clark, Amadou Diallo, Renisha McBride, Tamir Rice, Sean Bell, Walter Scott, Philandro Castile, Ayanna Jones, Terrence Crutcher, Alton Sterling, Freddie Gray, John Crawford, Michael Brown, Jordan Davis, Sandra Bland, Botham Jean, Oscar Grant, Corey Jones, Ahmaud Aubrey, George Floyd. I invite you now to speak peace and love into the world by speaking of those who you hold in your heart as we continue to send positive energy and hope into our world. Simply now speak the name of a person you would like to honor and celebrate out loud in the space you're in, or enter that name into the comments below. We speak of those that we carry in our hearts as a sign that we care for a larger global world around us. We speak of those and we carry them in our love, our strength, and our power. I now bind them and their families and community with the love and mercy, compassion, and strength of this community. I invite you now to readjust your body. If you're able to take a moment to turn your chair or find a comfortable position to sit in, I invite you to find a window or other light source or source of inspiration that you can look at this time. As you're finding that position, realize that our meditation time will be slightly longer today, as I will be sharing some words from Martin Luther King Jr. And I want to be able to give a body of his thoughts. So as we begin, always, I invite you to stretch yourself out, to connect your mind and your body and your spirit as we enter this time of reflection. So we'll go into prayer position, and we'll raise our arms up above us, bringing them back, tightening up our shoulders, opening up our chest, dropping our arms down, shaking out our hands a little bit. Get some blood flowing out to your fingers if you can. Drop your arms down. And we'll take a few deep breaths together. We'll breathe in. Nice deep breath. Hold it for 2 seconds and then release. Breathe in. Inhale. Hold 1,000, 2, 1,000, and release. Inhale and release. Inhale and release. Inhale and release. One last one. Inhale and release. I will be sharing with you some words from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today from his lecture given in 1966. I believe the words that he used then are just as relevant today. Slightly different context change, but just as relevant, just as important to hear, just as important for us as Unitarian Universalists, for those of you who are to hear. I think that he had a little bit more hope for us as UUs than maybe some of us do today in seeing our progress with race, with racism, with white supremacy. It has been a struggle with Unitarian Universalists to engage and fully accept our swimming in that ocean and to understand our responsibility in it. And so I will begin by just sharing some words. I invite you to just sit and reflect. Unfortunately, I'm not an orator like he is, so I don't think that I will completely do justice to his cadence and tempo and engagement, but I invite you to bear with me and to just listen along. I would like to use as a subject the church, remaining awake during a great revolution. I am sure that each of you has read that arresting little story from the pen of Washington Irving entitled Rip Van Winkle. One thing that we usually remember about the story of Rip Van Winkle is that he slept 20 years. But there is another point in the story which is almost completely always overlooked. It is the sign on the inn of the little town on the Hudson from which Rip went up to the mountains for his long sleep. When he went up, a sign had a picture of King George III of England. When he came down, the sign had a picture of George Washington, the first president of the United States. When Rip Van Winkle looked up at the picture of George Washington, he was amazed. He was completely lost. He knew not who he was. This incident reveals to us that the most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle is not merely that he slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up on the mountains, a revolution was taking place in the world that would alter the face of human history. Yet Rip knew nothing about it. He was asleep. One of the great misfortunes of history is that all too many individuals and institutions find themselves in a great period of change and yet fail to achieve the new attitudes and outlooks that the new situation demands. There is nothing more tragic than to sleep through the revolution. The great question is, what do we do when we find ourselves in such a period? Certainly the church has a great responsibility because when the church is true to its nature, it stands as a moral guardian of the community and of society. It has always been the role of the church to broaden horizons, to challenge the status quo, and to question and break mores if necessary. I'm sure that we all agree that the church has a major role to play in this period of social change. I would like to suggest some of the things that the church must continually do in order to remain awake through this revolution. First, we are challenged to instill within people of our congregations a world perspective. The world in which we live is geographically one. Now more and more we are challenged to make it one in terms of brotherhood. Modern man, through his scientific genius, has been able to dwarf distance and place in time in chains in our jet planes and have compressed into minutes distances that once took weeks and even months. Secondly, it is necessary for the church to reaffirm over and over again the essential immorality of racial segregation. Any church which affirms the morality of segregation is sleeping through the revolution. We must make it clear that segregation, whether it is in public schools, in housing, or in recreational facilities, or in the church itself, is morally wrong and sinful. It is not only sociologically untenable or politically unsound or merely economically unwise. It is morally wrong and sinful. There is another thing that the church must do to remain awake. I think it is necessary to refute the idea that there are superior and inferior races. We must get rid of the notion once and for all that there are superior and inferior races. It is out of this notion that the whole doctrine of white supremacy came into being. And the church must take a stand through religious education and other channels to direct the popular mind at this point. for there are some people who still believe this strange doctrine. Now, fortunately, I am sure that you don't have any Unitarian Universalists who believe this. The next thing that the church must do to remain awake through this revolution is to move out into the arena of social action. It is not enough for the church to work in the ideological realm and to clear up misguided ideas. To remain awake through the social revolution, the church must engage in strong social action programs to get rid of the last vestiges of segregation and discrimination. People talk about the long, hot summer that's ahead. I always say that I don't think we have to have a long, hot, violent summer. I certainly don't want to see it because I hate violence, and I don't think it solves any problems. I think we can offset the long, hot, violent summer with a long, hot, non-violent summer. People are huddled in ghettos, living in the most crowded and depressing conditions. They need some outlet, some way to express their legitimate discontent. What is a better way than to provide nonviolent channels through which they can do it? If this isn't provided, they are going to find it through more irrational, misguided means. So the nonviolent movement has a job to do in providing the nonviolent channels through which those who are caught in these conditions can express their discontent and frustration. Now, let me say that I am still convinced that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom and human dignity. Most revolutions in the past have been based on hope and hate, with the rising expectations of the revolutionaries implemented by hate for the perpetrators of the unjust system in the old order. I think the different thing about the revolution that has taken place in our country is that it has maintained the hope element and that at the same time it has added the dimension of love. Many people would disagree with me and say that love hasn't been there. I think we have to stop and talk about what we mean in this context, because I would be the first to say that it is nonsense to urge oppressed people to love their violent oppressors in an affectionate sense. And I'm certainly not talking about that when I talk above love standing at the center of our struggle. I have not despaired for the future. I believe firmly that we can solve this problem. I know that there are still difficult days ahead, and they are the days of glorious opportunity. Our goal for America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with America's. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before Jefferson etched across the pages of history the words that I just quoted from the Declaration of Independence, we were here. Before the beautiful words of the Star-Spangled Banner were written, we were here. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. We will be able to transform the jangled discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood and speed up that day when all of God's children all over our nation and the world will be able to walk this earth as brothers and sisters. Blessed be. I invite you now into a moment of silence as we share in community reflection on these words. May we say together, blessed be. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to invite you to not sleep through the revolution. I want to invite you to find a way to participate in education, in being church, in building a beloved community outside of your normal circles, by sharing reflections with people on your own understandings of racism, of asking questions, of learning more, of understanding the struggle of people of color in this country, of understanding how we can be allies and people of color working together to transform and to live to the hope that Martin Luther King Jr. has given us. It is in no way, shape, or form my intention to tell anyone how to protest, how to rise up, how to not sleep through the revolution. My only ask is during this time that people remain as safe as possible, that people, when they rise up, they lift their voice, they lift their hand, they move the pendulum and the arc of justice and the arc of the universe towards justice. I ask that as you remain engaged and you move forward in this time and place. As always, if we are to recognize what we need to do in this world, we do so when we say that we believe in something that's greater than us. We hold out that peace is something to be held onto and cherished. We recognize that no race, no ethnicity, no superiority or inferiority is ever present when the divine is. And the divine resides in each and every one of us, from you and me. And we wish goodwill to all members of society. We pray today that everyone be safe, be loved, and receive justice. As we say together, Amen, Amin, Shalom, Salam, Namaste, and blessed be.